And okay, and if you have comments and questions, you can put them in the chat. And Jessica Sterling, our wonderful Ashby Village volunteer coordinator, will be monitoring the chat, and she'll be sure that we get to your comments. I have already put
know how to do.
mute yourself, please. I've already put a couple of things into the chat. One of them is a wonderful editorial op-ed that Peter Sussman wrote, and he may make reference to that when it's his turn to talk. So anyway, okay, so here are our panelists. So Peter Sussman, who I just mentioned, and who it should be up on your screen at the beginning of this panel. And Peter, maybe you can raise your hand for people who are having trouble seeing you. I mean, raise your real hand.
Real hand, both real hands.
Whatever. Okay, so Peter is a charter member of Ashby Village, and he's an author and retired editor at the San Francisco Chronicle. He became disabled more than a dozen years ago, and he is a named party in a legal action brought by Compassion and Choices to preserve the End of Life Option Act, which allows Californians, who are certified as terminally ill and of sound mind to request and receive medical aid in dying. Okay, so that's Peter, and you'll be hearing more from him. So Judith Coburn, who's also up there on the screen with her both hands, real and Zoom raised. She was a journalist for 40 years, reporting for many outlets, including the Village Voice, the New York Times, and the LA Times. For the last 15 years, she has worked as a private investigator, mostly on death penalty cases. And that could probably be a whole meeting in itself. I was quite intrigued by that. She is also a named party in the legal action, and you'll be hearing from her as well. Okay, now Pat Sussman, who's there up on the screen. So she says that from KPFA to co-founder of Ashby Village, with stops along the way, nursing school, long-term care, hospice, first as a volunteer, then as a director, lifelong medical, as a chief operating officer, and then as a board member and a consultant to Contra Costa Health Services, which is where I met her. Most in Ashby Village, most of Pat's professional life has focused on aging in the community. So she's going to start us off today by telling us a little bit about what it was like in the beginning, the early discussions and what the issues were and what safeguards were put in place. So Pat, take it away.
Thank you, Julie. And I'm going to be very brief, actually. It's important for you to know that I'm tangential to today's discussion, but I do have a bit of history to add. I was hospice director from 1990 to 1997. And during that time, as an individual, this is an individual, although I was a hospice director, I became a part of a group of doctors, ethicists, hospice families, nurses, social workers, clergy, and hospice leaders. And we were discussing the end of life issues, something we all dealt with in hospice every day. And we were talking specifically about the right of an individual with a terminal illness to have the ability to choose to end their own life with medical assistance. And that's very important, that we were very much talking about assuring that there'd be no abuses in the process. And the standards we discussed ultimately helped to shape the Oregon death with dignity law. And then that ultimately led to California's end of life option law. So right from the beginning, safeguarding against abuses was central to the development of those laws. And with that, I turn it over to Judith and Peter.
All right, well, that was short, but I'm pretty convinced that people will have questions, particularly when you talked about who was involved in those discussions. I mean, that was a very rich sample of people, and I can only imagine what topics they brought to the table. So we will, don't go away, because I feel we will be coming back to you. Okay, so Peter is going to tell us about what exactly the End of Life Option Act is, so that we know what's in peril here, and then who's challenging it. What is this lawsuit all? Who's challenging it and who's defending it? So, okay, Peter.
Yeah, thank you. So in 1997, Oregon enacted the first in the nation law to allow physicians to prescribe lethal medication to adults who are certified as terminally ill, that is, with 6 months or less to live. Those who qualified had to undergo medical screening to assure they were of sound mind and acting with full understanding of alternative treatments. The patients were required to self-administer the medications. In 2016, California followed suit with a similar law entitled the End of Life Option Act. The word option was chosen to underline that this is an entirely voluntary process initiated by the patient. Usually the patient's motivation is to avoid the pain, unbearable suffering, and dependency that all too frequently characterize terminal illnesses. And it's important to note that this option is not a death sentence. The death sentence, it's the disease itself is the death sentence, but it allows qualified patients to advance the timing of their imminent deaths if they wish, and if they qualify. Polls in California and elsewhere across the nation show overwhelming public support for medical aid in dying among those in both major political parties and in all demographic categories and geographic areas. Such laws currently exist in 10 states and the District of Columbia. Why talk about an eight-year-old law? Because it is currently being challenged in a federal lawsuit filed in Los Angeles by 2 people with disabilities and 4 disability organizations that have what I consider misguided but historically understandable wariness about anything that strikes them as resembling euthanasia. Of course, the California option is not euthanasia. That is illegal in every state. The plaintiff's concern is hypothetical, based on no actual deaths during the years the law has been in effect. In their briefs, the plaintiffs speak of fearing that they might be induced to take this option because they're disabled, and in fact, inducing someone to kill themselves is a crime and remains a crime. Although the organizations that brought the lawsuit claim to speak for the disabled, a national poll shows that 79% of people with disabilities support such laws. The plaintiffs in this suit cite what they consider violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act in their briefs, despite the fact that the ADA was designed to remove barriers to personal autonomy, not to impose new ones. The plaintiffs sued the state, but now I and 2 other people with disabilities, one of whom is Judith, along with 2 physicians and the organization Compassionate Choices, have filed the legal action to intervene in the lawsuit in support of the current law. I signed on to the lawsuit to help demonstrate that the plaintiffs didn't represent all disabled people. In addition, I had witnessed the deaths of several people close to me, the agonizing deaths, who were not given the ease of mind, the personal autonomy, and the assistance that they had begged for in their final weeks. I consider their treatment cruel. Although their suffering was palpable and deeply disturbing, the laws at the time did not give them the right to the kind of compassionate end-of-life care they were begging for. I owe it to them to help give other dying people the peace of mind they deserve. I've been asked to discuss what we can do to save the current law.
Peter,
Yes,
can
go
you
ahead.
hold on to that thought and we'll come back to what we can do?
Okay.
Okay,
All
I want you to talk a little bit more about your own personal situation, but before that, Judith is going to tell us how she came to hear about this and why she signed on to the lawsuit as well, and then we'll come back.
Mhm.
Okay, Judith.
Okay, yeah, the division of labor here was that Peter was gonna present all of the details about the law and why we're concerned about this lawsuit that would basically strike the law down. The beginnings of my personal interest in people being able to choose medical aid to dying was two friends who lived in states that did not have these laws, the kind of law we're talking about, the End of Life Option Act in California or Oregon. And one flew with, incurable and metastasized cancer, colon cancer, flew to Belgium, where, this kind of medical aid is legal and much more easy to access. And also can be used by people who aren't Belgian citizens. And she went there with her daughter and used the law in Belgium to kill herself, basically. And that was shocking to me. I mean, I actually understood why she wanted to do that, but it was the first time that I saw what someone had to go through in order to access medical aid for dying. I mean, she flew to Belgium. I mean, if you were sick and weak and fragile, how could you, fly to Belgium? And the second was the experience of a very close friend who again lived in a state with no access to medical aid to die. And she flew to Florida, where she had a friend who was a doctor, and he had agreed to secretly, because it was completely illegal, to help her with medication to end her life. Again, very serious metastasized cancer, no possibility of recovery. And in that case, a horrifying result happened. And that is that he somehow didn't give her enough morphine, I think, for her to really die. So what ensued was, a 4-day nightmare of trying to administer more medication and so on and so forth. So those two, hearing the experiences of those two friends really made me think a lot about medical aid to dying, and I felt that I supported that idea. But then it became even more personal for me when I got ovarian cancer. And ovarian cancer has very little side effects. I mean, there aren't symptoms really. And it was discovered, unfortunately, later than we might have liked, accidentally. So I went through the whole cancer thing and the whole chemotherapy thing. And that's when I started thinking, okay, I want to know where I have to go, to end my life if I want to. I'm not going to do chemotherapy. I really wasn't into the sort of military approach that many people have to cancer. We're gonna, we're going to kill this cancer, we're going to, you know, and so on. And so that's when I, you know, started doing research on the internet and discovered the California End of Life Option Act, and was tremendously relieved to discover that California had this law, which basically gave me a choice about how I wanted to die. So when I then heard from someone in Ashby Village that the law was being attacked by disabled groups, and who are arguing essentially that the law is unconstitutional. That's why the case is in federal court. And I was, you know, that really upset me. And so when Ashby Village sent out a message, I'm not sure who did it, saying they were looking for interveners in the suit, I volunteered. And let me just quickly explain what that means. The main case that is against and hopes to basically abolish the California End of Life Option Act, you know, is a federal case brought by, you know, several national disability groups. What we have a kind of a side case, which is that we, you know, the United Spinal group is basically suing the state of California in order for the law to be rescinded. So we have a little side suit, which is in which we're arguing that that United Spinal and their group does not really represent all disabled people. And we would like to intervene in the case because we don't think that the state of California will really present the personal and, you know, the personal aspects of this to other disabled people. And I should say that one of the things that is really difficult in this for me is that I've been very involved and supportive of, you know, the Center for Independent Living and the various disabled groups in California. And so to be essentially on the other side, but not really, of some of those groups is very difficult. And, you know, that really presents the dilemma that we have. So I guess I'll just stop there and see what else we want.
Okay.
Julie,
Right.
can I make a brief comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah, and also, Peter, when you make the brief comment, I appreciate, Judith, you sharing your own personal story with us. That was, you know, helpful to understand where you're coming from. Peter, you talked a little bit about sort of the theoretical part, but I know you were going to also share your own story about, you know, why this issue is important to you personally. So yes, make your comment and also, you know, to tell the story.
Well, let me just say that I too have been involved in disability issues, and I have been until recently a board member for 5 years of the Center for Independent Living. So I just wanted to clarify that they have not taken a position against the current law. They have not taken any position on the issue.
Good.
So,
I'm glad you said that.
yeah.
I left.
There are other disability groups that feel strongly about this and have spoken on behalf of disabled people, and I and apparently 79% of disabled people across the country do not believe they represent their interests. So that, just to clarify that. I don't want to get too deep into my own involvement because it involves friends and family members, and I feel awkward about sharing some of these stories because some of the participants are still there. Let me just say that the two cases that most move me involved a family member and a dear friend, both of whom wished in their final days to be done with it, and were in great pain and in torment, really. Neither of them wanted the other medical alternative, which is to be medicated into a stupor so that somehow this body is preserved until it dies of natural causes. And they wanted to go on their own terms. They wanted a sense of personal agency and asked for it, but were denied it because in the states where they lived at that time, there was no such option.
Okay.
That's-
So we're going to talk in a minute about some things, Judith, particularly you mentioned this, about what might be in the future and also what we can do to help. And then we'll look at your comments and questions. But I was struck when we had our little meeting, Judith and Peter and Pat, in preparation for this, by the fact that all three of you talked about something Peter just mentioned, that people wanted their own personal agency to be able to control what happened to them. And I think you talked, each of you, about the fact that in the end, a very large number of people actually didn't make use of the option, but they wanted to know that it was there. So Pat, I think you mentioned it early on in these discussions when you were involved with hospice. Do you want to just add something to that about, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can get there. You may have to just hear my disembodied voice.
Okay, that's fine.
Would you just reframe that question again, please? Or
Well, I believe you talked about the fact that when you were in the early days, but maybe when you were the hospice director, you really came to understand that people wanted control. They just, that was the issue. That was the issue.
Yes. When I was director, I took a little, just a little self-survey over a period of a few months, and some other hospice directors that I know had done so. And, you know, a lot of times a patient will talk to a nurse, and that's always how it usually happens, and say, you know, I want to know about how I can die. I mean, what kind of medication do I need? I want to die or whatever, but they're interested in having that information. Nurses talk about it. Nothing is ever heard again after they get information. Some people continue the discussion, and some people continue the discussion until they are really adamant about the fact that they want to die. And that's a very, very small percentage. Now, also, I want to say that many, many people, even with that option, for whatever reason, and I think some of it, this was a while ago, were really frightened about the idea of not having the agency, as Judith was talking about, hearing so often the awful, awful tales of people who did take medications and it didn't work, and either were there for a long period of time, ended up in the ICU. It was pretty bad. And the other thing is, I want to talk about briefly, is unremitting pain. One of the things is we talked about always in hospice was that we could take care of pain. Well, we really can't. There are all kinds of medications and cocktails and so on, and it has improved. But that is what most people fear, is that they lose their control because they are in so much pain. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. That's illuminating. Okay, Judith.
Julie, I will add to that that most people who in California and other states that have this elect to, I believe it's a majority, elect to take advantage of the End of Life Option Act, end up not taking the medication, and that's fine. No one is pressuring them to take a medication. This is entirely up to the person who is dying to decide the terms of their own death.
And it's the majority of people.
Okay, so Judith, you want to add to that and also tell us what's ahead? What's going to happen next? And Peter, I think both of you had some ideas maybe about what we could do if we wanted to sort of informally join you in fighting back against the challenge. Judith?
Well, I have no idea what's going to happen, really. The thing that scares me is that this lawsuit that hopes to abolish, the California law will go to the Supreme Court, and we know how conservative the Supreme Court is, and without offending any particular religious group, 6 members of the court are Catholics. And, it's the doctrine of the Catholic Church not to support these kinds of laws. So doesn't mean that some of them, might in fact vote in our favor, but it makes me very, very nervous. And since it's a federal law, it could affect the laws in the 10 states that have these kinds of laws. So
You also mentioned an issue related to people with mental health issues or dementia. I can't remember which one it was, and how this. Go ahead.
Well, a future issue, if these laws are found constitutional here, is the belief by some people, and it's not involved in this case or our intervention, that people suffering from mental illness should be allowed to, have an option of medical aid in dying. And I personally had 2 friends with severe paranoid schizophrenia who simply couldn't live with the side effects of the medication, and the medication didn't really help that much. And they both committed suicide. So, some people believe severe mental illness should be included in these laws, which they aren't at the moment. And Canada is debating this, and will soon, the parliament, I guess, will go up or down on whether medical aid for the mentally ill should be included. And there seems to be support for that there.
Okay, but that, as you said, is not part of this, what's going on here now about this.
We're not trying to expand the current law. We're defending the current law.
Okay, Peter, you said that you thought there was something people could do. And because at the beginning you said that one of the reasons that you joined us was because you felt that the organizations that were trying to overturn the law did not represent the disability community, and that you thought the people who were concerned about this and wanted to protect the law should let the organizations that they work with in the disability community know how they feel about this. So you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sure. I think that anyone who is disabled and who wants to preserve this option should be lobbying the plaintiff organizations and letting them know that they don't speak for you. The plaintiffs in this case are the United Spinal Association and organizations called Not Dead Yet, the Institute for Patients' Rights, and Communities Actively Living Independent and Free, which is a independent living center in Los Angeles. All of the independent living centers are modeled after the one in Berkeley, which, as I said, has not taken a position. Many other organizations also nationally have not taken positions on this law. So I think one thing we can try to do is if you are disabled, speak up and let them know that they're not speaking for you. And the op-ed I wrote for this Papers in Southern California specifically was based on the fact that they don't speak for me. I would also think that the biggest thing we can do, disabled or not, is to help educate others. This is an under the radar threat to a law that doesn't loom large in most people's lives until it looms very large and near the end of their lives. And so I think it's important to spread the word among friends and groups you belong to and to the media, and explain why you believe the law must be preserved and whether you take advantage of such an option or not. And as Pat has said, and others, many of those who choose the option never end up taking the medication. You can certainly support respect for the dying and their end-of-life autonomy. The state should not be allowed to dictate to the dying just how they must die. That is a decision I believe belongs to people who are terminally ill, and I should underline that all of the cases we're talking about, the law includes many safeguards that have been shaped under with medical ethicists and others to assure that the people who take the medication are of sound mind, understand the options to what they're doing, and actively choose to take this. There's a delay built into it, so it can't be a spur of the moment decision. We need to help people understand that that's an option that people who have been certified as having 6 months or less to live ought to be able to have to maintain their human dignity. It's anyone who's watched someone die in a way they don't want to will understand this, and so we need to kind of testify to that.
Okay, so let me give you a few pieces of information here that might be helpful. We do send out notes from all of our general monthly meetings about a week afterwards, and we usually put links to organizations. So we will put links to the organizations that Peter mentioned that you might want to contact. We also are in the midst right now of doing a survey of our Elder Action members, which are about 125 people. Members are people who are on our mailing list, basically, to find out what your priorities are. So you get to weigh in on this. If this is one of your priorities, you can certainly indicate that. And please, if for those of you who got this link to the survey already, it's in the agenda. We sent out an email. Please take the survey. We've had fantastic results in past years by getting a lot of people to respond, and it really gives us a feeling that we know what you all want us to focus on. So, and Peter, the link to Peter's op-ed was also in the agenda. It will be in the notes, and it will be in Focus on 4, which comes out the first of the month. So if you're not getting any of these materials from us, put your email in the chat and we'll make sure you get on our mailing list. So, and we don't send out much email, so you won't be deluged. Jessica, what have we got in the chat that people, and if you didn't put anything in the chat, but you have a question or a comment, raise your hand and we'll get to you. And Jessica, do you have some comments in the chat? Okay, Roberta, while Jessica's looking, you have your hand up. Unmute and go for your question or comment.
It's really more of a comment. I just wanted to say that in case there are people who really want to learn more about the law, which actually has been revised since 2016 to make it a shorter waiting period. But we had a wonderful presentation last spring given by Compassion and Choices, which explained all that. And it's available on our YouTube channel. And one of the nice things about that presentation is it had 3 families who talked about their own individual and family journey around this issue. And 2 of them successfully used the medication to end their lives. But the story is really about the family who was there supporting them. And the 3rd family was one in which the man in that family requested the medication and chose not to use it at the end. And that was also a very interesting story. And I think watching those is they're very illuminating. So if you want more information, it's on our YouTube channel. And I just want to also mention that the law was upgraded in California so that there's only a 48-hour waiting period now, as opposed to the much longer period.
Great. Okay.
And let me just add to that, that we've emphasized a lot of the negative stories, but Roberta points out rightly, and I've experienced one with a neighbor and friend who had terminal cancer and sent a note around to friends and relatives saying, here's what I'm doing, and then gathered her family around while she was still able to appreciate them and understand what was happening, and had just a lovely moment to express that this is her desire and what her final wishes were, and to be with them at that time. And so there's a lot of positive stories as well as the negative ones from people who take this option and are very pleased to do so openly.
Okay.
Shouldn't be furtive.
Roberta Spike, we'll get to you in 1 second. Jessica has put into the chat a link to the YouTube channel, but if you can't figure that out, just go to the ashbyvillage.org website and you'll see a link to the YouTube channel. Okay, Roberta, you want to unmute yourself and go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
I just have another uplifting story. A very good friend of mine married to my best friend, was an oncologist, and he was one of the doctors. He's in the peninsula that lobbied Congress to pass this issue. And a few years later, he developed a very bad lymphoma. He had the best treatment. He worked at Stanford, and he knew that this is it. Anyway, so he used that own medication to end his own life. So he was one of the ones that was the instrumental in it. So that was sort of an interesting story for him.
Yeah.
The family.
Yeah. That's a nice, good karma story, I guess. Okay, Jessica Sterling, I'm not sure where you are on the screen. But
I'm.
You have some stuff in the chat that we should be addressing.
I think that the only question that I saw here, I think, was addressed. It was, it said it's worthwhile to talk about the new proposal to include those with long-term mental health issues. And I think, did you not talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we did. In fact, the person was typing it in as we were discussing it. So that was nice.
I see. And then also, Greg introduced himself from Benicia Carquinez Village. Hi, Greg. Thanks for introducing yourself. If anybody else is a guest, you're welcome to put your email into the chat as well. But thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any more comments, questions, stories, observations?
Here's a new one. Just came in.
Okay.
There's a book that was recommended. Now, these chats are for everyone, so everyone can view them. And so there's a book that Melinda recommended, In Love by Amy Bloom. And this is about her husband's use of the Belgian organization's end-of-life options. Oh, and I'm sorry, I don't have my video on. You can't see me. There I am. And then also there's a question here. How does opting to end one's life impact life insurance coverage? Who could answer that one?
That's a good question. We will see if anybody can answer it, and if not, we will put that in the parking lot, and we'll see if we can get an answer to that. Do any of you know the answer to that? Pat, do you know? You're muted, but I think you're shaking your head. No, you don't know.
But there's someone I can ask.
Okay, Roberta Pressman, do you know the answer to
I'm
that?
just going to make a snide comment, which you'd think that the life insurance people would love it, since they wouldn't have to keep paying for medical care.
Okay.
I don't know.
And
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll comment on the Judith Bloom book. I read it, and
It's actually Amy Bloom.
or Amy
Judith
Bloom, sorry.
We
Amy
all
Bloom,
know about Judy. Judith.
wrong Bloom, yes. It is not about the type of end of life issue we're discussing. That is that her husband was not given a terminal diagnosis. He wanted to act before that, when he realized he had Alzheimer's and would be degrading. So it's a little bit misleading to put that in the same discussion, but feel free to read it. I just wanted to comment that it does not apply to the End of Life Option Act.
Okay, so usually we do announcements at the end of the meeting, but this is sort of a comment announcement that Marcia Hoffer has, and we think it was in the agenda too. So Marcia, I don't know where you are on the screen, but go for it. You want to tell us about a relevant event. So where are you?
Here I am. Some
Okay.
of you may already know about this because when I got the email about this event, the event I'm going to talk to you about was also mentioned. It's a screening and discussion this Sunday at Congregation Bethel. The film is by a Berkeley filmmaker. It's called Jack Has a Plan, about a friend of his who had brain cancer and used the End of Life Option Act. It's a surprisingly entertaining film because Jack was a very interesting, unusual guy. So although it's, quite serious and moving, it's also got some funny parts, and it's a very, very interesting story. My group will be co-sponsoring that event. We are A Better Exit, and actually we are hoping to expand the law once we're successful in defending it, of course, and keeping it in California. We would like to see the law expanded so that people like Amy Bloom's husband and my husband, who died in Switzerland, who had dementia, would be included. There are many people who have not only early to mid stage dementia who certainly still have the mental capacity to make a decision like this, but other people with progressive neurological conditions such as Parkinson's or ALS, who may not be able to use the law by the time they meet the legal requirement of 6 months to death. So if you're interested, all you need to do is go to the website of Congregation Bethel. It's bethelberkeley.org. And if you click on their calendar and go to January 21st and click on the film presentation, it'll take you to a little form to register for that event. It's a free event. So if anybody would like to come, we'd love to see you there.
Okay, and if you've got the agenda for this meeting today, there's a link to that in the agenda.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, Jessica, have we got more comments? And does anybody else want to say?
Yes.
Where are you?
Yes, there were two more, it looks like. One was Lori was responding to the question about the cause of death affecting
Life insurance.
and so that's in the chat. She says doing MAID does not show up on the death certificate. And
Medical
then
aid. I guess MAID is medical aid in dying, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
And Anne asked, can you say more about the arguments that are being put forward against the end of life option?
okay, Peter and Judith, can you expand on the arguments?
I have read their brief, and a lot of it just plain doesn't make sense, frankly. And it does something which I've never seen before. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Among their legal arguments is a cartoon. It's the cartoon has an option, shows someone in a wheelchair with assisted justice on the right. Oh, no, I'm sorry, assisted suicide on the right and suicide prevention programs on the left with stairs instead of a lift, and the person is instead of a ramp, and the person is in a wheelchair. So although it's far from a legal argument and no one has ever seen such a thing before, in a legal brief, it expresses what their argument is, which is that we make it easy. We forbid suicide prevention, but we allow this form of end of life option, and they somehow make an equal treatment argument, as if people are not allowed, or people should be to have equal due process, to be treated equally. Everyone should not be allowed, because it's against the law, of this, suicide. It's a tortured argument, and I can't even summarize it, but that's one of the arguments. They also, as I said, cite the Americans with Disabilities Act, which, as I said, is to enable autonomy, independence for the disabled, not to get in its way. But they use it in the sense that they claim that everyone who is terminally ill is by definition disabled, and therefore must be protected even from themselves, apparently, under the ADA. It doesn't make much sense to me, so I have a hard time summarizing it, but that's roughly what they're arguing.
Okay, Judith, you want to add to that?
Well, essentially, they're saying that any law that permits medical aid to someone who's dying is a violation of the American Disabilities Act, because the ADA essentially is about enabling disabled people to be treated equally. And then the other argument they seem to make is, I agree with Peter, it's kind of wacky, but they say that instead of having these kinds of laws, we should build up suicide prevention programs. And that they're not, currently there isn't enough help for people who are suicidal. So they're basically blurring the distinction between suicide out of what can I say, despair, and the desire to end your life because of pain and terminal illness. So it's a little wacky. I mean, they go on and on about how there isn't enough help for suicide prevention, and medical care isn't good enough, and giving a whole lot of reasons that they claim that a disabled person might want to, use medical aid in dying. So,
Okay.
Yeah, there's also the assumption that people who are disabled must be protected from themselves.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
What it amounts to, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do one last sweep to see if there are any more comments or questions. I would encourage you to stay on for another few minutes, just so you get a sense for some of the other issues that we're dealing with, and so that you can help us figure out, for example, whether this is one that we want to prioritize. It is not one of our priorities right now, but okay. So I'm gonna, yeah, Roberta, and I'm gonna sort of get off the order of the agenda a little bit, because I can't force you to stay here. So, and if we were in a room together, maybe I would glare at you if you looked like you were leaving, but I don't want you to miss some of this information. So go ahead, Roberta, and then I'm just going to randomly pick what I think is important for you to hear. Go ahead, Roberta.
Yeah, I just want to make another clarifying comment, which is right now, people with dementia are not eligible to utilize the end of life option, because you have to be of sound mind. But what you can do, it's not the same as, but there are forms you can fill out. In fact, one of them is on the Compassionate Choice website, which you can fill out in advance and have notarized And what it does is it expresses your wishes if you get to the point where you're seriously ill and they list the different conditions that you can check off. You can say that under those conditions, I want to stop life-sustaining treatment, but you can't opt to actually get medical aid in dying.
Cannot, is that what you said? You cannot.
You cannot, but you can stop life-sustaining treatment if you fill that out in advance. And then if you are cognitively impaired, those wishes will be respected because you were of sound mind when you filled it out.
Could I say something just quickly? And that is that the website of Compassion and Choices, that those are the people that are defending the law, is very, very useful. It has all sorts of different kinds of information, including handbooks about how to deal with some of these issues that we've raised. So I really recommend people going there. You can get endless amounts of information.
Right, and we'll put a link to that into our notes as well. Peter, did you want to say something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Marcia, whoever it was that was talking about things that they would like to add to the law that has nothing to do with preserving it, but blue sky in the future. There is also a movement to allow to avoid the self-administration clause of the law. And the reason for that is that some people who want to who qualify in every other way are simply physically incapable of lifting the medication or the drink or whatever it is to their mouth and ingesting it. The guarantee is in there. The safeguard is in there, of course, to make sure that you do it of your own volition and no one else is giving it to you. But there is a movement, and I think even possibly a court case to add to do away with the self-administration requirement.
Okay. All right. So if you think of something in the next 10 or 15 minutes that you forgot that you wanted to say about this, we can come back to this. Okay, so the next part of this is going to be sort of speed announcements where you get to hear some of the issues we are working on. So Roberta Pressman, I'm going to start with you so you can do a plug for one of our partners, the California Alliance for Retired Americans. Go ahead. Mute, unmute, unmute.
I didn't realize you were going to ask me to do it, so I'm not prepared, but I will do my best. So CARA, the California for Retired Americans, is working on trying to get back the majority in the Congress. And they have identified basically the best way to do that is in New York and California. And they have identified the states, the possible districts, the congressional districts in California that are up for grabs. And they have started a program called Senior Ambassadors. And what they found is that in these particular districts, of the population there, over 50% in each of these designated districts are actually over 55. So it's an older population. And what they've done is culled the names of people who are either independent or undecided. And they're starting a program right after the primaries, after the March primaries, where people start postcarding these names, introducing yourself, and then staying in touch with a particular group of people where you, over the year, encourage them to go to the polls, to go to candidates' night, but basically to get them to vote. And the hope is that by getting them to vote, typically that would encourage a more Democratic majority, but they're not endorsing specific candidates. And
thank you for saying that, because Ashby Village is a 501c3 organization. We do not endorse, we do not get involved in partisan politics. So This
But
is a
it-
way to get out, to get seniors more involved.
Right, and it's an interesting program. If you want to learn more about it, if you want to volunteer, I think, Julie, you're going to send the link out too.
Yes, the links will be in the notes, and also it will be in the Focus on 4 at the beginning of the month. Amy, you're next. Speaking of postcarding, Amy's going to tell us about a live event that Elder Action is sponsoring. Have at it, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'll be really quick, following up on the nonpartisan piece of Ashby Village. We are partnering with civiccenter.org. We are writing on Thursday, January 25th. That's next Thursday, from 1 to 3 live at Ashby Village. We are writing to parents in Arizona, parents or guardians of teen girls, getting them to register to vote. So join us. We'll have fun. We'll provide everything, stamps, envelopes. You just have to write a couple of notes on each letter and address your envelope, and we'll mail them. So looking forward to see as many of you as possible. Okay, bye.
Pick up a packet.
Good job. Okay. I did want to call your attention to something that's on the agenda, at the bottom of the agenda, and also in the chat. Many of you know Rochelle Lefkowitz, who started this group with Marsha Friedman. She has been the coordinator and the mover and shaker of this group, and she has, for the last number of months, stepped back from her involvement in Ashby Village. She recorded a Zoom message to bring everybody up to date about what her status is. So the link is in the chat and also in the agenda, and I will put it again into the notes. She does want you to know that she's not moving away and she is not dying, but her role in Ashby Village is surely going to change. So if you know her and you'd like to listen, it's a very short, about 10 minutes.
Julie, I think you sent that directly to me. This is Jessica. So I'll put it in the chat for everyone. If
Yeah, I put it in the chat at the, okay.
Oh, you
No,
did?
I put it in the chat at the beginning, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't see.
Okay. Margot Smith, I don't know if you want to say anything about this, but Margot is the chair of the Berkeley Commission on Aging, and tomorrow is their monthly meeting, and there is a link to you can go in person or on Zoom. So Margot, do you want to say anything? I don't know if you're still here. I can't see the screen. You want to say anything about this? Okay. I think you were here before, but I don't see you now. So anyway, they meet the day after our general meeting. So that's just a plug for them. To give you some feedback on something that we did in December. We had somebody come and talk to us about PG&E, and there are many proposed rate hikes. And I just wanted to let you know that Ashby Village did sign on to a letter that many other organizations signed on to, and individuals can sign on to this too. So again, we've got links to all of this, and you can make use of your voice. Judy, sorry, I skipped over you, but we do have some climate action. This is one of Ashby Village Elder Action's current priorities. So unmute and tell us what you have to say. This is a standing item on our agenda, the climate action item.
Yeah, we have been trying to address the issue of plastic pollution over the last few months. We did a presentation in December with a speaker from Berkeley Ecology Center. She gave us a lot of information about the whole problem with plastics and recycling and all the things we should try to be more aware of. We tried to take certain actions at the following meeting. We had some suggestions for people of actions to take. One was to sign a petition to Amazon to stop using so much plastic in their packaging. And it was a coalition with a number of other groups. We signed petitions if we were asked to. I don't know how many people actually followed through, but the good news is that there were 138,000 petitions signed, and that Amazon has agreed to eliminate the plastic envelopes that they use. So it was quite successful. It was, a number of groups working together on that one, and we put our little pitch in there too. We also ask people to maybe join other organizations that are already actively involved in fighting plastic. Also, we gave lists of about 5 or 6 local stores that are called refill or re-up shops, where you can go and take a bottle and have it refilled or buy things in bulk, just to avoid all the plastic packaging. So that's just kind of some of the things that we decided we could try to do together. We're all trying to just educate ourselves more and take some personal action, and also maybe become involved in some of the legislation. I know I just watched one of the things we may talk about later is Senator Ben Allen in California, Southern California, is very active in plastic bills, and there's something called Let's Talk Trash, which is a video that he's put out about all the different bills he's supported, and also all the things you can and can't recycle, and what does all this stuff mean. So there's lots of more education to do, and we'll introduce people to other videos and contacts that they can make. I won't go into too much of that today. I think it's probably more than we can kind of discuss. I don't know how much time you want me to take.
Well, I will say one thing. We did want to consider the possibility of having some speaker come back and clarify things, because I pretty much stopped recycling all my plastic bags because she told us that they have to shut down the recycling centers for 2 hours to clear out the plastic bags. So now I'm completely confused, and we're having arguments in our house about whether we can or can't, whether things with 1 and 2 on them are recyclable or whether that's just a marketing ploy. So Judy wanted us to get a sense from you about, do you want someone to come back and answer our questions about what we think we heard, and whether, we're adding to the mess by, doing what I'm doing, not recycling a single plastic bag anymore. So would you just if you think we should have a speaker come back, raise your hand. Okay, I see hands raised. Good. Okay. Wait, keep your hand up for a minute. I just want to go to the other screen. Okay, and then I see a lot of people who don't have their cameras on. But I do see a lot of hands up. So great. All right, I think that's a good idea. I don't know what to do with my plastic bags in the meantime, but I'll figure it out.
Another thought I had is perhaps at one of our meetings, we would have a little more time for us to ask each other, what are you doing with this? What do you know? Because there's a lot, there's so many little details. Everybody has a different question, and maybe come up with a question and research the answer and bring it back. You can do a lot of research online or going to different websites for the waste management companies in your city, try to find some answers, and we could share them together. So,
yeah, that's good. And we were going to carve out some time where we could ask you, so
Yeah.
as a result of that presentation, what did you do? And, have the expert
you
respond
learn?
to that.
Yeah.
Okay, Rains from the Gray Panthers has a announcement to make.
Thank you, and greetings to all. It's great to see Elder Action going strong. We're hosting a gathering Thursday afternoon, the 25th, here in Berkeley, to do a preview of a movie called Grains of Sand, with the filmmaker who's been working with her mom and somebody else into their 90s and looking at the challenges and issues and support. And I think it's relevant. I'll put the links up on the Aging Community site. I haven't put it on the Panther site yet, but I'll put a link in the chat where people can learn more and RSVP. It's a free afternoon event.
Okay, and is it going to conflict with our postcarding event?
Is that the 25th? What's the timing of that?
Same time. We're 1 to 3. What are you, Rains?
2 to 5.
Well, there you go.
Okay. Write postcards to teen parents.
I'll happily support that as part of this. So.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Okay. Okay, Jessica, did we get any more questions or comments in the chat about the end of life option discussion?
There was just one. Let's see. It's the option of IV infusion self-administered is also something that A Better Exit is requesting. It's a comment. And that's it.
Elaine, are you still here? A better exit? What is a better exit? Let me see it where you are. Yes, you are. Elaine, can you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about what your church is doing? Maybe not. Okay. All right. All right. So you just got a very brief overview of some of the other issues. I want to make another pitch here, especially for folks who are already on the elder action list. Please fill out the survey. We need your guidance. Otherwise, we're going to be picking priorities that are not of interest to you. So this is a good example. There are 51 people, 53 people on this call. This was not an identified priority, but you know, there may be other things out there, and our priorities have definitely changed. In 2020, after George Floyd was murdered, police reform was pretty much at the top of our list. And then in subsequent years, when we did surveys, climate action became number one. And the steering committee is very curious to see what is going to come up next. So, steering committee members, do you have any last comments you want to make? Any last thoughts? Anybody else? I see no hands, but I can't see everything here. Okay. I think we are finished. And thank you all so much for coming, and especially Judith and Pat and Peter, you know, very knowledgeable, helpful discussion. And do the three of you want to add anything? Do you have anything, last minute thoughts that you want to say? Peter, you must have something to finish with.
No.
Read his editorial. Nope, you're good.
No,
Okay.
Yeah, just get the word out, because I don't think this issue is at top of anyone's mind, and by the time it is, it's too late.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, nobody knows about this lawsuit, which, as far as I'm concerned, an emergency. So,
Peter,
Yeah. I'm
Peter,
sorry.
can you keep us up to date if there are actions or moments along the process of this case where we should be intervening or writing?
Sure.
Okay, that would be great.
I mean, I imagine at some point there might be an opportunity for a friend of the court brief, for amicus briefs, but I'm not sure. I don't think we've reached that stage yet.
Rhonda, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder what is, or who is the legal team that's working with you, Judith and Peter?
oh, very top lawyers from
LA?
O'Melveny and Myers.
Albany and Myers. I can't really pronounce their name, but yeah, that's
Plus the House Counsel for Compassionate Choices.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Okay, going once. I think we're done. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Super efficient.
That's
Thank you, Jessica.
Very nicely attended, Julie.
Yeah. Hot topic.
Do you need help with the recording? I mean, the link?
I need to stop it. That would be a good thing. Yes, I do.